So then how did you guys connect again in '04 for Time Served now?
So we had the link then, and like a good relationship. I don't remember when Kartel started coming to New York, so I don't remember if it was in this interim, but but we had like a real link, and
Mm-hmm.
he would come to New York, and he would only stay in the Bronx. His people were Bronx. He was like Bronx diehard.
Yeah.
It wasn't until years later on Hard Slam Rhythm when I used to tell him like, bro, like, because I lived in Brooklyn, so we would go get him and we would come to Brooklyn. But again, just like with everything, Federation, like we were in kind of like in the cut in a different part. It wasn't like going to Flatbush and I had a little studio in my apartment. We would go get him and we would come to the apartment and work, do dubs for people, record stuff for Cypher Sounds and for the hip hop DJs that were on the radio. That was one of the big links that I felt like I was always able to be really helpful with. Was I knew all of these hip hop guys, and so any of the guys who were open and into dancehall, we would do drops and dubs for them, and I would do that like with Sean Paul and with Sham. And cut them on plates. Like we would do them, go to Don Juan, cut them on plates. We took Baby Sham plates, physical plates, to the tunnel so Sham could give them to Flex in the tunnel. And so that was one of those roles that, because of like the kind of multiple worlds that I lived in, all of the Hot 97 guys, especially, like I knew really well. And so with Kartel, like he would come by the house and we would do that stuff. We'll go link him on shows. Like this is probably after the second mix when he could fly out. Like I would go DJ for him. You know what I mean? Like we would go do shows, and so so the link was there, and I think most of that stuff probably comes after the second mix. But so then we're going to Jamaica, like we do the mix, and it was that was one of those mixes that at that time it was CDs and radio in Jamaica has always been very important and very powerful. But when you get to a certain level of street music, like there was a lot of stuff. It wasn't like, in New York or Toronto, like a rap record, but you just bleep the curses and of course you can play it. So as long as the curses aren't there, there's a lot of stuff that couldn't play on the radio. There wasn't able to be a clean version of it. So, and again, like we talked about earlier, like the culture of dancehall is really like the streets. And when it came to like recorded music, Taxi Man, Bus Man, Cars. And so like I started getting calls and reports of like, I'm hearing this Vybz Kartel CD everywhere, every bus, every town bus, every country bus. And that was like a big deal to like a crew from New York. You know what I mean? Because he was continuing to build and build and build. And it was just like, it was everywhere in the streets of Jamaica. And so I think so one, kind of like the mutual respect was established there. I think if we had made a flop, we probably wouldn't have had a continuing relationship. But we made, between Federation and Kartel, we made something really dope that clearly had an impact on the culture and the streets of Jamaica and dancehall music worldwide. And so we had the link and we kept the link, and we had talked about working on the next thing. And as he's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then he's on Sting that year. And so at that point we usually go to Jamaica kind of right after Christmas. So he's on Sting, and that's the year. What year is that? Is that 2004, right? Where him and Ninja clashed.
They clashed either end 03 or end 04, because Sting is always December, right at the end.
So it was 03. So it was 03. Yeah. So it was 03 going into 04. And so they have that clash. We all saw what happened, physical altercation. And then shortly after that, Kartel ends up getting arrested. and spends, I don't know if it was a week, if it was a couple weeks, if it was a little more than that.
Mhm.
It was more than a couple days locked up. And so I'm like, shit, this is crazy. Like, wow, this is really crazy. And so then we were back down in Jamaica, and either maybe like right before I got down there, he had gotten out, but was nowhere to be seen. No parties, no dances, no nothing. They were on some like Taliban hideout levels on the low. And so we always used to stay at there was a Hilton right in New Kingston on Knutsford Boulevard. It's kind of just like the main strip. It's right down the block from Asylum, and years later from Quad. It's this one little strip where there's a couple of hotels that at that time was really like New Kingston. That was kind of like where any business travelers would stay, and banks were and stuff. And so there was a restaurant that was like a Jamaican sports bar directly next to Asylum called Jamrock, which had been there for years. I believe years before that, it was a nightclub, but that's before my time. Someone else will have to tell that story. And so that was where we would go. We would just walk up there and sit down, get some food or whatever. Be by the hotel. Hotel was kind of the base. And been trying to link Kartel, whatever. So we linked and was like, yo, like we're over at the Hilton. And so somehow we came to this thing that was like, all right, like I'll come link you at Jamrock. Like, all right. So we're over at Jamrock, sitting down kind of like in the back. And I'm like, he's probably not going to show up, whatever. I'm just like eating some food or whatever. And him, like the Sting clash and then him getting arrested was like national news in Jamaica. It was a big,
For sure. Big, huge.
And it had just happened. And we're kind of sitting in the back, and in through the restaurant walks Kartel and like a big squad, probably like a dozen people. And people are like, yo, like it was a shock to see him out. You know what I mean? This is like a restaurant full of people. And he had just gotten out, and we sat down and was like, yo, mixtape again. And so that was kind of where that was the foundation of Time Served, but it's also where the name Time Served comes from, because now we're like, well, time something is everything. We did From Time to Time. The album is up to the time.
Up to the time.
He's the time minister, and that's his thing. And I don't remember who said it, but he probably said it because he's obviously very quick with the words. It was like, yo, and so we called it Time. So we came up with the idea to call it Time Served. And
crazy.
And you know, and there we go. But we also already had this formula of like I knew what he could do, and he trusted me and Kenny in what we do, and in like beat selection and putting it together. You know, like he never heard the first mix until it was out on the streets. He voiced it in the bag, done. And then it took over the place. And so he obviously trusted in us, what that we knew our part of it. And so that's where like the mutual respect and the relationship came in. And so, man, this part might be this part 2 of the interview might be 3 hours, because I just like you can cut me off at any time. I love talking about this stuff, man. And
no, because it's an amazing part where, again, we always hear the end product, but it's how you got to the end product is always the most, to me, is always the most interesting. Yeah, we know it's done. Yeah, Time Served, From Time to Time, cool. But how did you get there? That's always in my thought there. So Time Serve was recorded in the States, or you guys went back to Jones again and recorded Time Serve?
Time Serve. At that point, I don't think he could fly out for sure because of the court stuff. No, so I don't know if it was that trip or we planned a next trip to come down. But he was laying very low. He had an apartment in Kingston. So he wasn't in Portmore. It was like an apartment in an apartment complex. We're not talking about like baller mansions, house in the hills. Like he had an apartment in an apartment complex. I went, took a cab over there, hopped out of the cab, called him, the gate buzz it again. Like, I'm like, I don't know where, if they, like, I don't know how well this is going to work out. And so we go sit down in the apartment, and there's maybe, I don't even think there was maybe one person there. And so there's like no entourage. It's like I walk in, I have my Pro Tools, I have everything in the bag. And he's like, yo, you can record right here. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I'd rather not. Like, I'd rather like record in a studio and like do it. Yeah. I know my Pro Tools stuff, but it's also like, it's a lot going on. But when I walked in, we're in the living room, and from the bedroom, there was music blasting, and it was just a rhythm on repeat. It was a rhythm on repeat, looped, just playing. And I was like, we're talking, but I was like, yo, what is this? I was like, this is sick. It's dancehall rock rhythm. And so remember what that sounded like to you when it came out and how crazy it sounded?
Of course. It was a hard rhythm.
And super fast. And so no songs had even been recorded on it. And it wasn't like I got it on a juggling. I just walk into this apartment and this rhythm is blasting. And I'm like, yo, what is this? It was also, to get into some real nerd shit, it was also 5 BPM faster and had more melody in it. So it wasn't quite as stripped down. And he was like, oh, who built Dancehall Rock? It was Birch?
I don't know.
Or Scada. It was one of them.
Do it if you're bad. One of the two of them.
It was one of them. And he was like, yo, it's so-and-so's rhythm. Da, 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 da. And I was like, yo, can we use this on the mixtape? And he was like, sure. And so I finally convinced, I was like, look, I'd really like to work in a studio and just be able to like sit down and work. And again, he wasn't really going most places then, but one of the places he was going and where he was doing all of his dub work was a studio called Vertex.
Yes, that's what X-Ray.
Ray, exactly. X-Ray. And I had never met Ray. And so Kartel's like, oh, hold on. Let me see. He gets on the phone and not in quite as polite language as I'll use, but he was like, yo, Ray, I'm coming to the studio. I need to record a bunch of stuff. I go, okay. And so we jump in the car and we go to Vertex. And so I've got my hard drives, I've got my computer, I got my thing, I got my this, that, and the other thing. But there's a vocal booth and there's a little board. There's a little digi design board. And Kartel's like, yo, I need the studio. And it's just a one voicing room studio or whatever. And so I go and I'm like, all right, cool. We're using this studio. I was like, I'm plugging my hard drive in and recording. I was like, I'm not leaving anyone else to send me these files. And they're like, what do you mean? You can record it right on the thing. And I was like, I'm walking with this today. And so we recorded a bunch of stuff for the mix that day. But not everything. Like this one was a little more of an extended process. And then I think we recorded some of the stuff up in New York and we kind of just went back and forth, put that one together. You know, one of the ideas was like, look, like, yo, like the thing is called Time Served. Like, let's address the altercation with Ninja Man at Sting. And I was like, and again, just thinking of ways to kind of like make mixtapes interesting and do skits and just do different things, I grabbed the audio of the actual incident on stage at Sting, and I said to him, and it was one of these things where, like, again, he very much just like trusted us, because I was like, look, I'm gonna splice this up with the different parts of what's happening, but I want you to narrate it. But we didn't sit down and do it together. So I just was like, okay, I need you to talk about this. I need you to talk about this. And then I need you to talk about this. If you go back and listen to it, he sort of like intros it. Then you hear a piece of it. Then he talks about it. Then you hear another piece of it. And it's a really crazy piece of audio because
Genius, bro.
they're fighting with the microphones. So you hear all this thump, whack, boom, like microphones hitting the ground, microphones hitting people. So there's like the microphone goes and like all of that, but he's narrating it. And so we kind of go through that. And then I don't even remember what we played afterwards, but to make, again, to my point earlier, to make the mixtape have a narrative, make it have a story, make it tell a story, and make it be way more than just the sum of its parts. Make it be its own thing.
No, that's big right there, because again, it's how you're thinking. You want it to be more than just tracks. You want it to be it's almost like an audio movie, an audio mini series that you're trying to create, so then they could envision this when they're listening to this mixtape right here.
Well, I always wanted, even from before doing artist mixtapes, one of the things that Kenny and I really like believed strongly in was we want people to like, we're not ever going to be the guys that put out a mixtape super fast with all the new music, because there's already other people doing that. Other people have that lane down. So we decided we want to make things that you can listen back to 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 20 years later. Again, we didn't think 20 years later at that point, but we did think like, we want to make things that you can listen back to, that you can live with. And then when it comes to working with an artist, like now we're doing an original body of work, the way, like I described kind of how we thought about those things to you, that we're putting in all this work, this artist is putting in all this work, and they're trusting in what we're going to do. We want to make something that can last. That's going to be a piece of not only our catalog, but of this artist's catalog, and that was, again, that wasn't an idea that was there in 2003, 2004, but it was how we ended up doing it. And it was an idea that we very much carried intentionally with us in the future, working with other artists, knowing the impact that these things can have, and also the amount of work that we spend on them is like months and back and forth, and like tens and hundreds of hours. Like it's not a quick thing. And we also always felt like, look, if we're going to put in this much work, this should be something worthy of that work. And if it's something you're going to listen to 2 times and then put down, what's the point of us putting in all this time and effort? Let's make something that can last as long as possible and live as long as possible.
Makes sense. And remember, this time too, this was the Black Chinese era this time too. So if you're putting out these mixes, you got to come good. If you got that standard was set here. And as you said earlier, Kenny, he liked the remixing and acapella and stuff. So then, hey, Black Chinese here, we could do this too. So everybody's just trying to put out the highest level of mixtapes possible as they can at that point there.
Yeah, when it came to mixtapes, like outside of the artist things, like when it came to mixtapes, yeah, it was like Black Chinese doing like the highest of level things, and Copper Shot mixtapes,
yes,
in those times were, and specifically the ones that I really remember that stick out for me was there was a couple of like Copper Shot culture mixes that really like encapsulated that era of things. And certainly there were other people doing them, but in terms of like when we talk about like mixtape culture outside of like dance and live show, you know, those are the people that we always felt like were incredible, but also like we're not them. We don't want to do the same thing that they do. We want to do what we do and do the thing that we've been building and developing. And just to jump back a little bit in the timeline, there's one really important thing that I want to say about Kartel, Portmore, and the mixes that we did, because our mix from time to time was not the first Vybz Kartel mixtape. And there's important stuff before that led up to that allowed us to be able to do that and helped build up Kartel to where we all ended up connecting, the story that I told earlier. And Cassette Jones as Portmore guy, you know what I'm saying? And Kartel even tells a story about him and Cassette Jones riding the bus together on the first Kartel CD. You know what I mean? When we kind of talk about Portmore and we're, about wanting to get this personality and this stuff. I didn't know that at the time. I knew who Cassette Jones was from afar, but I didn't know that about their link. And so Cassette Jones had done a series, and it's interesting because they weren't mixed, so they kind of fall into a different category of CDs with Kartel. And if somebody can find them online, send me a link, because I cannot find them online anywhere. But there's a set of them. There's one called 7 Wise Virgins.
Yeah, either I've heard of it or I have the one, because at this time we were selling CDs and DVDs. So yes, I remember that one there.
There's one called 7 Wise Virgins. I think there's one called uptothetime.com. And there's at least one more, because I have them somewhere on CD. And there may be even more than that. And these were basically like, it was just Lyrics Fest. It was Kartel on rhythms. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't even know about these when we sat down and did that first mix. So I've only I learned about them shortly after, but getting to know those guys. But like, I hadn't even gotten those in New York. Like, I hadn't gotten my hands on those. But that was part of what was building him up in the streets of Jamaica. And same time, probably from before, but same time as that first mix, you'll remember this, Cash Money CDs.
Boss, you took the words out of my mouth just now, boss.
I hate to
that would be impossible.
I hate to do your job for you and ask myself questions. Cash Money and Scratchy B. Cash Money and Scratchy B. As another Portmore sound. Now, I don't know the actual facts of this. Scratchy B was described to me as Kartel's brother. So whether that was his blood brother or not, from those days, they were brothers. And no sound, nobody, no how, nowhere had more Kartel than Cash Money.
At all, boss.
None at all. And Scratchy B was the man behind Cash Money. So it's super important, again, in paying respect to the legacy and the history, and wanting to add what I can add, what Federation can add, what we can add. It's super important to make sure that we give credit to, but also we're a lot of years out from that now. And I feel like there's a lot of people that don't know about some of this earlier stuff. And
For
so
sure.
Cassette Jones with Vybz Kartel and Cash Money and Scratchy B with Vybz Kartel. Without that, there's no Federation sound in Vybz Kartel.
This podcast is brought to you by www.twolinedmusichut.com.